So as you guys know, I really love cooking with cast iron skillets, especially over an open fire or something like a gas stove. And they're really solid, literally, because they're made out of iron. These will last you an entire lifetime, and they can be passed down for generations if you take care of them. And that's what this video is about. It's cast iron maintenance. So some people don't know this, but cast iron itself isn't really non-stick. When you first get your pans, either in a store or online, they're usually going to look like this. They're really glossy and they are non-stick for the first few times that you use them. But then that non-stick property can go away and you have to season it to get it back. And that is just a process where we add a thin coat of an unsaturated oil to the pan, and then we rub it in and then bake it at a high temperature just to make the oil bond to the pan. And if I zoom in on the pan here, you can see that it actually looks kind of porous. So this is where the oil is going to seep in and give it that non-stick property. So I'm going to show you how to season your cast iron pan. Now this is something that you have to do when your cast iron is not rusty. In fact, seasoning it actually helps to prevent it from getting rusty in the first place. So if your cast iron is rusted, you'll just have to restore it first so that it looks clean like this. Maybe I'll make a video of how to do that in the future, but I don't really like to let my cast iron rust on purpose or get to that state. So maybe I'll do it with a cheaper one that I own. So I'm going to show you how to season this one, and I'll also show you how to wash out and season a dirty cast iron pan. So you're pretty much going to learn all the maintenance you need to do in this video. Now, when you're washing cast iron, usually you don't want to use any soap on it because soap will remove grease and it will remove your seasoning as well. Usually I'm able to cook with my cast iron a few dozen times before I actually need to re-season it. But since I'm re-seasoning, I am going to use some of the soap just to get everything off and start off with a really clean pan before I add layers of seasoning. And you also want to make sure that every single time you wash it, whether you're going to season or not, that you dry it off very thoroughly or very quickly. Otherwise, your cast iron will start to rust. Okay, so now we have two really handsome, clean cast iron pans, but we need to season them now. So the first thing I recommend doing is to actually bake them in your oven at about 200 degrees for maybe half an hour or so. Basically, we want to get the whole pans warm, but not too warm to where we can't really handle it. Like you can still wear gloves. I'm probably going to wear some during the first seasonings. But yeah, you want to get it kind of warm so that it'll absorb the oil into it better. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so here is the cast iron pan out of the oven. It's still very warm, actually kind of hot to the touch. So you don't really want to be handling it without gloves. This is what I'm going to use to keep it in place. And then, of course, I'm going to be rubbing it down with oil and have this towel as a barrier between that. So you'll be fine with this kind of setup. You won't burn yourself. Now, as far as the oil that I recommend you use grapeseed oil. Now, this might be a little bit controversial because usually, I guess traditionally, people would use flaxseed oil for seasoning their cast iron. But I don't think that that's a very good move to go with. First of all, flaxseed oil is expensive. Okay, this grapeseed oil, you can see, is 68 fluid ounces, and it's about 20 cents per fluid ounce, right? Not very expensive. And it's also pretty much the same oil that I'm going to be using to cook with when I'm using my cast iron, because generally I'm using it for high heat applications, and this is a higher heat cooking oil. It has a much higher smoke point. Flaxseed has a lower smoke point. So I would imagine that it's probably a bit smokier when you're seasoning your cast iron, if that's what you're going to use. And also, you're probably not using it with your cast iron that often. So it's not as versatile as grapeseed oil is. But anyway, you can use flaxseed oil if you want. So whichever oil you're going to use, you want to start off by adding just a little bit into the bottom of the pan there. And like I said, we're going to wipe it in with a rag here. This is this is a microfiber cloth. It might be better to use something like that because you don't want to use like a paper towel that's going to kind of break up on you and leave residue behind, because then when you go to bake it, it's going to kind of get burnt on and just mess up your seasoning a bit. So use something like this. Kind of sacrifice a rag to be an oil rag, a seasoning rag. And just rub it all in over the entire bottom and sides. You're going to be coating the entire thing, even the outside and even the handle. I'm just going to rub that in. I usually do the handle last just because that's what I'm using to handle the pan. You can see it's already starting to get that nice shiny look that it's supposed to have, like when you first got it. Okay, and then we'll get the handle. Okay, now we're going to place it in our oven, and your oven should be turned up to about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want it to be pretty hot here, and like I said, that's going to make this oil bond to the pan. And we're actually going to repeat that process 2 or 3 times with, oiling it, heating it, let it cool for a little while, because when you pull it out at 500, it's going to be really, really hot, and you won't be able to apply another layer of seasoning right away. So this is a multi-hour job. And as far as baking it, you're going to bake it at 500 for about an hour. While my oven heats up, I'll go ahead and get this one seasoned as well. It's probably a little bit too much. even for a bigger pan like this. So another thing that we're going to do when we bake it is we're going to put it in face down like this. And that's so that any excess oil can drip off. Because especially with this one, we're definitely going to have some excess oil. So I put too much on it, even though it's a little bit bigger and a little bit deeper. You do not need that much oil. Now we're going to hit our pans with another round of seasoning. And same idea each time, just rub it in. Finally, we'll add our third layer. right, and the seasoning is done. So, as you can see, it's quite a bit glossier than it was before on both sides of the pan. And yeah, that's basically the non-stick property. Like, if I feel it now, it's much, much smoother than when we started. And yeah, that seasoning should last us many, many months of pretty much near daily usage. So, that is how to season your cast iron. Hope you found this video useful. Peace out.